So welcome to Pints and Politics. I'm your host, Dan Parsons. As you know, each episode of Pints and Politics, we look for some of the most interesting guests in the state of Nebraska and the region to come on and talk about important issues to not only the state of Nebraska, but the region. So welcome to episode 27. Who knew? Episode 27 already. So for those of you who are following along, actually 3 years ago, this is our 3-year anniversary, Lance.
Congratulations.
3 years ago,
I'm happy for you.
You know, I was bored one day and I said, you know, let's combine a couple of my hobbies, and so here we are.
Drinking and talking.
Exactly. So, but truly, I want to welcome Lance Morgan to the podcast. If you caught episode 26, we talked about gambling and the important initiative that's being attempted to be on the ballot come this fall. But this, I wanted to sit down with Lance and get to know a little bit more about your day job and your passion, because since, for those of you who maybe didn't turn in for the last episode, Lance is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Ho-Chunk Inc. Lance launched Ho-Chunk Inc. In 1994. Wow, you were like in high school or something.
No, I was 26 when I started.
Wow, that's young.
I started working.
And Ho-Chunk Inc. is the Economic Development Corporation of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska. So Lance, welcome. So glad that you could stick around and talk about your day job and the passion that you have for the Winnebago Tribe and what you've accomplished in relatively a short time since 1994. It's been groundbreaking. It's been award-winning. Give us that synopsis of how things started.
The tribe had started a gaming operation, and Iowa expanded it around us. And we knew that as they built those big casinos in Sioux City and Iowa, that it was going to collapse our business. And so the tribe took the money that they had made, an extra $9 million during that time, and they invested it to start a new company to diversify. And so it was an all or nothing bet with really one of the poorest groups and communities in the state.
And that was 1994.
1995 was our first full year, but 94 they did it.
Yeah.
And so we took our chips and we put them on the table. Yeah. And it was a little bit scary. And I was the only employee at the time. I was a tribe's lawyer. Wow. And I quit that job. And I had an economics degree here from Nebraska and a law degree, sort of a corporate kind, and so which is rare in our world.
Well, and you did your undergrad here in Nebraska, and then you went to the East Coast.
Yep. Yeah.
So tell people, because I'm in PR, so I like to, if my guests won't brag about themselves, I'll do it for you.
Usually I like to brag about myself, but it's
So where did you go to law
my favorite
school?
subject.
Yes.
Well, I went to Nebraska here, so I'm a Cornhusker.
Yeah.
But I went to Harvard after that.
Yeah.
And my big moment, my big moment was when I got to come back to the Husker game and say, we're not only good on the field, we're good in the classroom. So, Harvard was work, Nebraska was love. Right?
So you came back to specifically work?
Yeah, I was a lawyer for a law firm, and I worked with the tribe, and I won them some money, this money we started with. Yeah, and so we took the money, and it was about $9 million, so it was no small amount, but it was everything we had. 2 years before, the entire discretionary budget of the whole tribe was $180,000.
Wow.
And so we bet everything on the future. And really, I was the only employee. We have 1,200 employees now. We we'll do about $280 million in revenue this year. And since we've started, we sort of keep track of the revenue. We're pushing $3.4 billion. And every time we hit $1 billion, we get like a cake to celebrate it. We always have a cake for everything.
I think that's appropriate.
We have a cake for everything. And so I think the test of time is what's important for us. And to have a company of that size in a poor rural Nebraska community is unheard of. And to have it in a place that we only had 9 college graduates when we started in our community with bachelor's degrees. We have 150-ish right now. And so it's really changed the entire landscape of our community.
And I just want to mention, because that is such an incredible record in such a short time. So some of the accolades under your leadership, Ho-Chunk Inc. has been recognized by national organizations including Harvard University, the Ford Foundation, U.S. Department of State, U.S. Department of Commerce, and the White House. And you were selected as the Champion of Change by the White House in 2011. In 2012, you were awarded the Nebraska Builder Award by the University of Nebraska, and you were appointed to the Board of Trustees of the Smithsonian's National Museum of American Indians in 2013. What a wonderful honor and recognition for the work that you've done, but also for the Native Americans that you represent. That has to be so pleasing.
Something that's not on there in my high school, I went to Omaha North High School, and when I was a senior, they started a tradition called the Vikings of Distinction.
Oh.
And I told my buddy, and he came, I was awarded a Viking of Distinction, and I told him, and he remembered that I said, if they ever give a Vikings of Indistinction, I'm a shoo-in. And so...
but you didn't get that.
I did.
You did?
I got the Vikings of Distinction.
But not the
And so I had my friends come to that because they knew me in high school, and you would not have predicted this.
Well, so that progression that you've seen so much of the Winnebago tribe, so can you give us a little bit of history of the Winnebago tribe?
Well, it's really a pretty tough history. There's a map on my wall, an Army map from 1833 that shows us owning northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, sort of Green Bay to the Quad Cities to Chicago. And then we got kicked around 7 times, I think, in 30 years. And we were stuck in two little towns in southern Minnesota. One of them was called Blue Earth. We have a company called Blue Earth Marketing now because of that. And the other town's called Winnebago. There's several Winnebagos around, but we don't live there anymore. We don't have anything to do with the mobile home either, or the RV either.
Yeah, how did that happen?
We don't know.
Yeah.
If we tried to sue them, they'd probably make us change our name.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a little known fact is Lincoln, after he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, the next thing he signed was an order killing 37 or 39 Sioux warriors who had an uprising in southern Minnesota. We weren't Sioux, we were the Winnebago tribe, but all Native Americans were ordered out of southern Minnesota, including us. So we left our homes, our farms in the field, we were loaded on a boat, transported around, and dropped off right before winter in Pierce, South Dakota.
So on the Missouri River.
Yes, in 1863, hundreds of our people froze to death and starved. And so we decided that we should leave. And we floated down the river really with nothing. A lot of our people didn't have clothes. And they took refuge with the Omaha tribe. Okay. And the government took the money that they had allocated to us to buy our land in Minnesota, and we bought the northern half of Thurston County. And I did a historical study just recently. I paid somebody to go back and check government records. And after 5 years of living there, he said, they're doing a lot better. He goes, for the first year, they lived in the ditches and the ravines. Wow. And would put tree branches over them to stay alive.
Wow.
And so it really is a sad tale. It's a tragic tale of what the government did to us. But I always tell people, this is our land. We paid for it in blood.
So one of the fascinating things in doing some research before having you on today, that struck me of that.
We're still mad, by the way, if you can't tell.
Damn right, and as you should be. But what struck me in doing some research, and actually I had read this article, Associated Press or maybe the Sioux City Journal, of reclaiming some of those lands that were taken away from you through the farming operations.
Yes.
So talk about that. I was fascinated by that from a historical beginning to even the square.
Thurston County, the part that we owned, was about 120,000 acres. And we were down to about 20,000 acres of what we owned. And what the government sort of does is, with us, is they said, well, after they sort of wipe you out, they said, we couldn't help but notice you have more land than you need. And they said, well, we'll give each of you a piece of land. And you can either develop it, and then we'll tax it, or if you don't develop it, we'll take it. And if they taxed it, we didn't know anything about taxes. They took it, and if we didn't develop it, they took it. And so we lost our entire reservation down, and then the rest of it they gave away as surplus, or they sold for a few dollars an acre to settlers. And actually, the federal government didn't implement an income tax until they ran out of Indian land to sell.
Is that
so
right?
It was a racket of some sort.
Wow.
And the government itself, I think they started feeling guilty, and they took total control. And other things, like if you wanted medicine, you had to turn over your land. It was criminal what was going on. And so the federal government in one swoop in the 1880s put all of our land in federal trust status, so that it couldn't be taken. And I think it was designed to stop the most egregious stuff. I wrote an article once called "The Curse of Trust Land," and the side effect was 6 generations of abject poverty. Because if you don't own your own land, you can't put it up for collateral, you can't tax it, or our government couldn't tax it ourselves. We talked about property taxes being a problem. It's impossible for us to have them. So we were a government with no income source. We're basically whatever the federal government would give us, we were beggars. And if you were a farmer and you had to put your land up as collateral, you couldn't do it. If you wanted to build a house and get a mortgage, you couldn't put your land up and do it. You couldn't do it. So the side effect was there's no entrepreneur development, there's no home ownership. Our farming was slowly killed. As people would die, they would die without wills, and their land would get divided up. I owned 1/10 of one acre on a 40-acre plot, and I didn't even know where it was. And so, how do you collateralize that, or how do you farm it? And the government would sort of lease it out for us, and they'd lease it out cheap to non-Indians, and we were just being exploited. And this is going on still. And I was upset about it. I knew about this, and the reason we don't farm is because we didn't have the capital. And I realized, Ho Chunk Inc., hey, we're a big company now, so why don't we just start farming? And so we really didn't have any clue what we were doing. We had a great logo, and we just started farming.
That's important.
We had a cool logo.
So you started purchasing property.
Well, the tribe itself already had property.
Okay.
What we did was we realized that if two pieces of land right next to each other, a non-Indian and an Indian would own it. If we would rent it out for 150, the government would rent it out to the non-Indian for 150, but he would pay that same farmer would pay 250 if it was
sure
a non-Indian who would farm it. And so we're missing about $100 an acre just through this process. And so we passed a matching policy so that said any low bid, any tribal corporation that farms can match it. And so what that immediately resulted in is an extra $1 million to $1.5 million a year for our tribe and tribal members, because we broke up the collusion that was going on. But to be credible, we had to start farming it. And to be honest, I'm a lawyer and an economist. I'm not a farmer. I've got a farmer now. and we've slowly started buying our own land as we grow and get successful. We've been adding to our own acreage, both the tribe and Ho Chunk Inc.
What types of crops? What are you doing with
Well,
the land?
we were doing corn, and we were doing beans and alfalfa.
Sure.
And I really feel bad for farmers, because you're basically at the mercy of these seed companies and at these fertilizer companies, and you're producing a commodity product, and it's hard to make money. And the way we were doing it was very difficult. So we decided that we wanted to do some value added. So we've switched to organic, and I think we will do about 900 acres of organic. And with organic corn, you get about three times the revenue and about 10% less. The problem is with switching to organic is it takes 5 years to do that.
Right.
And most farmers can't do that. But in our situation, the tribe was up to 30,000 acres, and some of it we haven't farmed for 10, 50 years.
That's amazing.
And so we had a lot of land that we could easily convert to organic. And the tribe doesn't think in terms of next year's crop. We think in terms of the next 100 years. And so we've been converting as much as our land to organic and higher value added as we can.
So some of your people, how did they embrace that? Were they skeptical about?
Everything we've ever done, our biggest critics are our own community.
Sure.
Between starting Ho Chunk Inc.,
Sure.
from the town that we built called the Ho Chunk Village, people were skeptical. And getting into farming, heck, even I was skeptical.
Yeah. Well, it's a gamble. We talked about gambling earlier. I mean, certainly commodity prices.
And we don't make much money farming, and some years we don't make any.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned earlier, the fact that people can't lowball us on our land rents has made an extra $10 million for the community and the community members. So it's a big deal.
Interesting. So I want to jump to one of your another initiatives, which is also an alternative crop, so to speak. But before I do that, I failed to ask your family history and how you're growing up and what.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about your family.
So my mother's a tribal member, and my father is a farmer, which used to mean white, but now it's changing. And my parents are both from Winnebago.
Okay.
And as I get older, I keep hearing stories about it. That's interesting. When my dad married my mother, it was the 1960s, and it was a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
He told me
Absolutely.
that somebody tried to annul the wedding, that not many people came to his wedding, and he wanted to leave because of, he was treated very poorly for that. And he went to Vietnam. I said, how bad must Winnebago been?
I'm leaving. I'm going to Vietnam. Thanks.
And so
Yeah.
I was born in the U.S. Naval Hospital in San Diego.
Okay.
And so I always kind of thought that was kind of neat to be from California.
Yeah.
But when he left the military, he moved to Omaha. He didn't want anything to do with it. And I grew up there. I went to Omaha North
Okay.
High, and it was
Okay.
my dad was a roofer, and so we didn't have a lot, but we did our thing, and they emphasized school, and that worked out.
Work ethic, and yeah.
And I joined the U.S. Army to help pay for college,
Yeah.
and then law school obviously worked out. But my parents now live on the reservation.
That's so cool.
My mother had some health issues, and it was better to live there financially. And they live in the town that I built, in a house that came from a factory that we bought in a loan from a bank that we own a part interest in.
What a great story.
So
I mean,
it really is
how
something.
proud must they be? That doesn't get much better than that.
Well,
That's
it's a great story, but they have a lot of neighbors who all have similar stories.
Yeah.
So the story that you used to get on the reservation is one of sort of poverty and despair, and we have that still.
Sure.
But there are families every day that do a little bit better, and we've built all these homes in our community. And if you could see it, it's if you drive through it, you can't help but notice how wonderful it's become in some areas and aspects of it.
So we talked earlier about the relationship with the gambling initiative and the state of Nebraska. I'm just interested, and many of us know some of the more high-profile examples, but what is that relationship with the state of Nebraska and your business to begin with? I mean, you've gotten so many awards and recognition through the years.
Nebraska, in fact, we once had a meeting with the governor when we broke ground for the new town we're building. And the governor said, is there anything we can do to help you? And I said, and if you know anything about tribal history, the federal government put states and tribes together and told them to fight over jurisdiction.
Exactly.
Right? They put
Yes.
two governments in one spot.
Yes.
And we've lost most of those battles. And so I said, frankly, this was Governor Johans, I said, it's better if you just leave us alone. We're on to something. We figured out a way to help ourselves. We for the last 150 years, we've been asking for your help, and it hasn't worked. And so let us be successful. And occasionally we run into trouble with states, taxation issues, whether there's all these weird rules on the reservation. If you were to come there to our gas station, the state of Nebraska wants you to figure out what your race is, to figure out what to charge you for price. And I'm not doing race-based pricing, and I told them I weren't. And every once in a while, they want to slap us down.
No, wait a minute. What now? How does that work?
That is the system. So the system was, until we changed it, that if you were to come to the reservation, if you wanted to buy gasoline or you wanted to buy cigarettes, things with excise taxes,
Okay.
the price would change depending on the color of your skin. And I used to say, hey, I'm half white, I'm half Indian, what am I supposed to pay?
Yeah.
Right? And we had a button that said white guy on it. And so
Seriously?
you would push it, and then the price would change. It would go up. You'd actually charge more. And that was the state of the law. And
Wow.
if you do your own value-added production on the reservation, tribal tax prevails. So we made our own cigarettes. We have a factory.
Right.
And we started blending alcohol with gasoline to make ethanol.
Right.
And now we have taxes that are based on jurisdiction, not race. And it can be controversial. But we're not doing that anymore. And people say we should, but we're not. And the way they used to control us is we didn't own the businesses. But Ho Chunk Inc. has hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, so every once in a while I'll build my own business.
Darn right.
And then we also can't be sued. We have sovereign immunity. And so we've been able, our economic growth hasn't, combined with our sovereign immunity, has allowed us to exercise our tribal sovereignty to create our own businesses, to create our own taxation systems, and to build our own economy. And that's why I said to the governor, if you just leave us alone,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't possibly have to control little Winnebago. And so that's our effort, is to really just sort of develop ourselves.
Here's the other, and just looking through some notes that your staff was kind enough to share with me, here's the other issue that kind of goes to my heart, and I know a lot of other people who are viewers and listeners to the podcast, clean energy. you've stumbled or purposely been very proactive in building a clean energy projects on the reservation.
Well, Nebraska is one of the toughest states to do clean energy.
Correct.
Because of the public power
Correct.
issue.
Yeah.
And so we looked at doing wind, but wind is primarily a tax credit driven industry, and the tribe, the Ho-Chunk Inc. is a tribal entity. As a governmental entity, we don't pay for taxes,
Right.
and so it's of no value to
Right.
us. And Nebraska wouldn't pay much for it anyway, the power. And so we were struggling with what to do. And if you have a big windmill, you can sell it to the government for 2 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour, and they'll sell it back to you for 10 cents. And so it really isn't a great deal if you can't use the tax credits. So what we decided to do was to put up solar power because it was less maintenance, and instead of tax credits, we could get grants. The tax credit was worth 30%. The grants themselves were worth 50%. And so we started putting up these solar panels. They were less maintenance, and we would offset the retail power. And so instead of selling it at 2 cents or 3 cents a kilowatt hour, we would just reduce our bill by 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So the tax credits, the grant combined with the offset of the higher price turned it into a viable investment for us. And at a corporate level, it really didn't meet our normal standards. It's probably about a 6% return on capital. And our board, they asked me about that. How is this going to grow us? And I told them the story. I came up with a scenario. And we had a power plant explode. The Terra power plant exploded 25 years ago, okay. And everybody got evacuated but us. And we were trying to decide whether we should evacuate, and we saw like deer and wild turkey running through town.
There's a hint.
And I said, there's probably somebody at FEMA said, I thought you called the Indians. I said, let's get the heck out of here. And I said, so we're really on our own, guys. And so this is when Walking Dead was a popular show. Yep. I said, when the zombie apocalypse comes, guys, we're on our own, and we're going to need these solar panels because no one's going to help us. And our board is all Native Americans. That's a good idea. So zombies and helped us get over the low return on capital.
That's fascinating. So who is your power provider? NPPD? Do they?
Burke County is a local one, and
okay.
NPPD.
Okay.
The last point I want to make on that is that I have some on my home, and somebody asked me what's my return, and I said it's 6 to 8%. But to be honest, it's worth way more than that to me because I love looking at it, and I like that my kids know that I do it, and I like that other people can see it. And as Native Americans, I think it's important that we take that step. And we have thousands of solar panels in our community. We have a field full of them, and any building that has anything facing south is full of them. And we've put them on elders housing and community buildings and anything we can think of.
It just seems natural, Lance, that much like your efforts to bring farmland back into the fold of your families, same thing historically with just the nature of the sun and the history of that component of your culture. It just seems really natural. And
it's an expensive thing to do, so most people don't do it. But we combined our tribal advantage and our access to some of the federal grants and just our general desire to do this, to really make it a thing that really makes us stand out. I think there's probably not a small town like us. We're very proud of it. And we've saved a few $100,000 too. So
well, and like you said, I think all of us, even those of us who live in the urban area like Lincoln, I take my recycling to the recycling center, once a month. And there's something about protecting our earth and giving back that hopefully it's in all of our cultures.
Well, we're playing the long game.
Yeah.
Somebody once asked us, "Are you here to stay?" Because we made some investment. We were wondering if you're here to stay. I said, we've been asking ourselves that same question. And he
hasn't
realized
always been our choice.
This is the mayor of a small town, and he goes, "Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way." We were wondering if you guys were going to stay too.
Well, as we begin to wrap up, I just want to tell you how thrilled I am to have this conversation, Lance. And what are some of the things that you want our viewers and listeners to take away? Because I think there's, again, a diamond in the rough of the work that you've done on the Winnebago Tribe, Ho-Chunk Inc., building it as a one-person employee back in 1994 to this multi-million-dollar corporation. What are some of the advantages that the Native people are experiencing because of the work that you've done these past many years?
Well, something I realized, when I grew up, my grandparents, we raised food and animals, and we had an outhouse, and we had a pump in the front yard for water. And I realized, I was talking to a fairly young teenager, and I realized they've never experienced that. They don't know that they're supposed to be downtrodden. They don't know that they're repressed. They've always had it okay. There's parts of our community that need work still in the social side, but a lot of people are growing up with this mindset that they belong, that they're going to be successful, and they're going to take advantage of the opportunities, and they're going to go to college. I wrote in an annual report, I have to write a letter every year, and I wrote maybe 4 years ago, I said, what I want to do is create a virtuous cycle of expectation and opportunity that drives the growth of individuals and families in our community. And so we're a corporation, we go out there and we make money, and what we're trying to do with it is what's different. We put some of it in the growth, and we put some of it in the community, and we give some to our tribal government, who's really the specialist in the social development side. But if you were to go to our website, hochunkinc.com, and you could see a video of the economic impact, and you can see a video of the town that we built from scratch. It was a cornfield, and it's a 40-acre town, and it's about to become an 80-acre town, and we have plans for another 80 acres behind that. And it's just amazing. The city manager of a big city near us said he was talking to one of the towns that's primarily non-Indian, and we were talking. He said he was talking to the kids, and they said, "What do you?" And it was a town that's dying, a small town. And they go, "What do you want your town to be like?" They said, "We'd like to be like Winnebago."
Exactly.
And he said, "I thought you'd be interested when you've got non-Indian kids saying they want to be like the reservation." He goes, "Things are getting weird around here," and that just goes to show you when you take a group of people, any group of people, whether it's a repressed minority or not, you give them a little bit of hope, you give them some capital and some know-how, you slowly get better and you get confident. And now that we have that, the cat is out of the bag.
Yeah.
We have no intention of going back to asking nicely, to asking for permission, to being repressed again.
You have, you've built some capital.
It's too late. It's too late to
Yeah.
stop us. We have hundreds of millions a year in revenue. We have lots of income that we can generate, and as long as we don't screw it up, and I have no intention of doing that, we'll just chug along, and we'll be a financial contributor in this small town for the next 100 years. We actually have a plan called the 100-year plan,
Nice.
where we're trying to stabilize the company and the growth, and really continue to make long-term investments, because it's too important to us.
Well, what a wonderful gift to the state of Nebraska, your talent. So, and as we close out, Lance, I'll put you on the spot, because I always like to do this with my guests. As far as I know, you've never run for political office, or maybe you have?
No, I haven't.
You have not. So this is always, when I have politicians on the show.
I was voted least likely to develop personality in high school, so
Well,
that's
we
your
proved
tip.
them wrong.
That's your tip.
So what's for Lance Morgan? What's the future for Lance Morgan?
I have a plan.
Okay.
And I have a son who's 14, who thinks he's pretty cool lately. He's
Most 14-year-old.
He's starting to be taller than me.
Yeah.
So he keeps reminding me. I said, "I'm rooting for you, son." and he can beat me at basketball now. I said, "That was always going to happen. You're getting better, and I'm getting worse." So my goal is, I have 2 girls in college. One's about to enter graduate school.
Nice.
And my son, when I want him to go to college. And then I think I'm going to do something different. I teach law right now at Arizona State.
Oh, you do? Okay.
And just a 1 class. I'd like to do some writing and do something. I've thought about running for office.
Yeah. I'm probably not the first person that suggested that.
I'm not really a Republican, and that's hard to win a statewide office here. And so I'm not sure I want to be a sacrificial lamb, but I would like to make a difference in whatever I do. And I think maybe it's teaching. Maybe it's, I'm not the kind of guy that retires.
Yeah.
I started a law firm last year, and that's been going real well. And it's all, by the way, it's 5 Native American partners.
Nice.
Four of them are women, and so it's a pretty exciting thing. So maybe I'll focus on that a little bit. But I'm looking for the next great tribal member to sort of step in and take over. And that's what we do in our community. It's been going on for a long time. We've always had leadership, and we pass the torch, and we let the young people do their thing. I'm 51, so I still got a few years
I'd
left.
say you've got
But
some.
I've been doing it for 25
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
And so I'm really looking for the next chapter in my life to get started here in the next 4 or 5 years.
And as we talked earlier, you've got that entrepreneurial bug too, and yeah, it's hard to stuff that in the pocket and to be sensitive to not only the people that you've been helping, but also to your own talents to be able to continue to do great things. So.
Well, I mean, I think that I talked to somebody I know is a pretty well-known person. He works still, and he's in his late 80s, and he says the guys that retire spend a week planning their haircut, and so, I don't want to do that.
Doesn't sound like any fun at all.
I don't want
Lance.
to do that. So I want to figure out something to do, but I don't know what it'll be.
Well, I'm confident that whatever you do, you're going to continue to succeed and lift up and help people around you. So thanks for being on the show. Thanks for the work that you do. And as we close, I just want to thank our Pints and Politics producer, Mr. Steve Van Hoosen, Kathy Plunkett from Kathy Plunkett Photography, Kim Remington, who is the glue that holds Parsons Public Relations together on a daily basis. That music that you're hearing as we fade out, the Pints and Politics theme, is by a young man here in Lincoln by the name of Jack Rodenberg. Thanks to Fuse Co-working for this beautiful space and Parsons Public Relation, and our guest, Lance Morgan.
Thank you for not having any pints on this one for me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
I thought it was appropriate. Okay. Thank you.